Hey guys, welcome to Hot Ice Productions, and today I'll be counting down the top 10 players that I absolutely hate. Now for this countdown, I'm not going to list the most hated players, but rather the ones that I personally can't stand. And if there's a player you like on this list, just remember that this is my opinion, and this is just a video made for fun. Death threats are not necessary. Number 10, John Scott. Now to clear something up, I don't exactly hate John Scott himself, but I do hate the way people have been hyping him up this past season. The fact that he was voted in the All-Star game was an absolute joke. The NHL All-Star game is for the league's top players. But what do you expect when there's a fan vote? Any fourth-line beer league bum can be in the All-Star game if they're voted high enough. John Scott really only knows how to hit and fight. He has almost no skating ability, and he's only scored 5 goals in his NHL career. Yet he was still in the All-Star game. It just goes to show you how much of a fucking joke this fan vote is. The NHL needs to get their collective heads out their asses and put an end to the fan vote. I will give John Scott credit though. At least he scored in the All-Star game, but I'm pretty sure it's because the real All-Stars let him score so he would feel good about himself. Shortly after the All-Star game was over, he was sent down to the AHL to play for the St. John's Ice Caps. However, he seemed to be better in the AHL as the Ice Caps named him alternate captain. He's currently on the Montreal Canadiens roster, and to be honest, it just shows how much of a train wreck the Habs are if they're resorting to calling up a talentless goon. Number 9, Chris Pronger. For whatever reason, this guy needed to be a bully. He used his size to intimidate other players pretty often. Even though he was a solid defenseman, he was also dirty and hated by many. As soon as he led the Edmonton Oilers to the Stanley Cup Final in 2006, he demanded to be traded. Edmonton hasn't even made the playoffs since then, and Oilers Nation hates his guts as a result. His dirty play consisted of stomping on the leg of Ryan Kesler in 2008, a vicious hit on Thomas Holmstrom in 2007, and a hit on Dean McAmmond also in 2007. He was suspended 8 times in his career. However, karma eventually caught up with Pronger as concussion issues ended his career. I guess he got what he deserved in the end. Number 8, Marty McSorley. This guy has always been a goon no matter what. He served as a personal bodyguard for Wayne Gretzky in both Edmonton and Los Angeles. He was notorious for one incident in particular, however. On February 21, 2000, McSorley clubbed Donald Brashear in the head with his stick. Brashear immediately hit the ice and suffered a concussion. To make a long story short, he was brought up on criminal assault charges, sentenced to 18 months probation, and never played in the NHL again. Number 7, Claude Lemieux. In the NHL, there are 2 kinds of players bearing the last name Lemieux. One of them, Mario Lemieux, was the greatest and most skilled player of all time and was overall a class act. And then there's this guy, Claude Lemieux. This was a guy who would always find a way to play dirty. One of Claude Lemieux's most famous incidents came when he played for the Montreal Canadiens. In a game against the Calgary Flames, he allegedly bit Calgary's Jim Peplinski. Another famous incident came in 1996 while playing for the Colorado Avalanche. In a game between the Avs and Detroit Red Wings, Lemieux checked Detroit's Chris Draper from behind, and Draper went face first into the boards. Draper suffered a broken jaw, nose, and cheekbone, as well as a concussion. Lemieux's hit on Draper kick-started one of the greatest rivalries in hockey between the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings. But the rivalry was only legit in its first decade, and nowadays the Red Wings own the Avs, so there's not much of a rivalry between them anymore. In the end, Claude Lemieux took home 4 Stanley Cups for 3 different teams, as well as the hatred from opposing fans and players. He would always get under the skin of players and do whatever he could to win the game, even if it meant crossing the line into dirty play. Number 6, Alex Ovechkin. Now I know what you're thinking, and no, I don't hate him based on his skill level. I hate him based on his style of play. He's an immature man-child who never saw anyone he didn't want to hit. God damn it. He's an immature man-child who never saw anyone he didn't want to lay a dirty hit on. He's also known for the occasional dive and his ego. He also seems to have a lack of motivation. For example, on defense he just stands there, and on offense he hardly ever passes to anyone. that could also count towards selfishness. Again, I don't really hate him because of jealousy or the fact I'm a Penguins fan. I hate him because he's a selfish asshole. Number 5, PK Subban. Subban is known for many things. Sure, you can argue that he's one of the best players in the league most nights, but you can't look past his diving and his on-ice antics. For example, in Game 1 of the first round of the 2015 playoffs, Subban intentionally slashed Ottawa Senators forward Mark Stone and ended up getting ejected. Most players on this list would have just walked away, but Subban decided to whine to the refs about it and throw a mini temper tantrum. As you can tell, this guy really doesn't have any class or a sense of what the rules are. Not to mention, Mark Stone suffered a broken wrist from that slash. Needless to say, PK Subban is one of those people who does something bad and throws a fit when things don't go his way. Really, PK? Grow the fuck up. Number 4, Brad Marchand. Well, now I've got the attention of Bruins Nation, haven't I? This little rat is the very definition of a cheap shot artist. It seems like he's been trying to injure other players his entire career. Want to hit him? He'll go for your knees. Going after a loose puck? He'll knock your skates out from underneath you. Skating with this little punk behind you? He'll elbow you in the head or spear you in the nuts. If you're injured, he'll be a total jackass and try to injure you even more. He'll hack and slash you after every whistle, hoping you'll fight back, and if you do, he runs away because that's all that little pussy knows how to do. He also whines constantly to the refs after someone does something mean to him, even though he deserves it for being a classless piece of shit. He also assaulted an interviewer, stabbing him with a sharpened toothbrush, and he also kicked a cameraman in the knee, with skates on. Who does that? He thinks his style of play is like street rules, but in all honesty, even street rules wouldn't deem his bullshit legal. Thank God for guys like Brandon Prust who speared Marchand in the groin a couple months ago. He got a fine for it and he said it was the best money he ever spent. I'm more than likely to agree with him. Also, just look at the guy's face. Go ahead and tell me that punk-ass look on his face doesn't scream cocky, overprivileged white trash. Number 3, Matt Cooke. Didn't think a Penguins fan would put one of his former players on here, did ya? Well, you're wrong. Even when he was on the Pens, I hated him. He's a grade A asshole who always tried to hurt other players, kinda like Brad Marchand. However, unlike Marchand, Matt Cooke has ended a player's career. The player in question, Marc Savard. During a game in 2010, Cooke delivered a huge blow to the head of Savard. Cooke wasn't even suspended, and to make matters worse, Savard has been dealing with concussion problems ever since and can't even live his daily life properly because of the incident. Cooke also elbowed the head of Ryan McDonough and boarded Adam McQuaid, which both resulted in injuries. In the end, he will always be known as a headhunter and overall dirty player. Number 2, Patrick Waugh. I know that there are some of you out there who think he's the greatest goalie of all time, and to give him credit, he did do a lot of things to validate that opinion. As a rookie, he led the Montreal Canadiens to a Stanley Cup title and also popularized the butterfly style of goaltending. He also held the record for most goaltending wins at one time. However, he was also known for being a whiner and an asshole. This was evident in his last game in Montreal during the 1995-96 season. Waugh allowed 9 goals in Montreal's 11-1 loss to the Detroit Red Wings, which was the worst home loss in team history. During the second period, the crowd gave him a mock of applause after Waugh made an easy save, in which he sarcastically raised his arms in mock celebration. When Habs coach Mario Tremblay pulled Waugh in the middle of the period, Waugh stormed past him and told team president Ronald Corey, "It's my last game in Montreal." Waugh was suspended by the Canadiens the next day. Waugh would later say that despite allowing 5 goals in the first period, Tremblay kept him in net in order to humiliate him. Although, in all honesty, it was most likely because Tremblay was a shitty coach who didn't know any better. 4 days after the incident occurred, the Canadiens traded Waugh to the Colorado Avalanche. Although I'm convinced the trade made him even more of an asshole. He got into fights with Detroit Red Wings goalies Chris Osgood and Mike Vernon, who both pummeled his ass, I might add. He was also rumored to be a cocaine addict at one point. and as well as being charged with domestic violence for supposedly hitting his wife. He also threw fits after getting scored on, so really Patrick Roy's legacy is a double-edged sword. He did some things to improve the goaltending position, but he was also notorious for his questionable personality. And number 1, Eric Lindros. Looking for a self-entitled piece of shit on this list? Well, you found him. His cockiness and overall bad attitude started before he was even drafted. Apparently, he thought he was hot shit going into the draft. He commented saying he would never play for the Quebec Nordiques, and, well, guess who drafted him? He refused to even put on the Nordiques jersey given to him. This is clear evidence that he thought he was bigger than the NHL and that he was entitled to something. Listen here, Eric. When a team drafts you, you play for them, no questions asked. For example, I'm a Penguins fan, but if I got drafted by Philadelphia or Washington, I would play for them. Granted, I wouldn't feel right about it, but I would still respect the fact that they wanted me and play for them. Karma definitely caught up with this little cunt, as he was traded to Philadelphia, who never won a cup. Not to mention the fact that in 2000, New Jersey Devils captain Scott Stevens finally decided to knock Lindros off his high horse. Lindros would suffer concussion problems later in his career and would leave Philly in 2001. He signed with the New York Rangers in 2001-02 and wasn't very successful, barely averaging a point per game in the 72 games he played that season. However, he did make the All-Star game, but was injured and couldn't play. Lindros would leave the Rangers in 2003-04. He would play for Toronto and then Dallas afterwards, but was never the star player he was supposedly going to be. And that's karma's way of slapping you across the face for having such a tremendous ego. Well guys, I hope you liked my video, and if you didn't, well, I'm sorry you didn't like it, but again, it's my opinion, and this video was just made for fun, so death threats are not necessary. And if there's a player that you hate who isn't on this list, go ahead and share them in the comments. I'd like to hear your input. And I'll be doing a lot more top 10 lists on this channel. This channel is mainly going to be a hockey channel from now on. I have another channel called The Arcade Productions, if you guys want to check out more content of mine, and that channel has mostly video game reviews and other stuff like that, so if you're interested, it's there, and I'll leave a link in the description for those of you who are interested. So guys, this is Hot Ice Productions saying take care and keep your stick on the ice.